Record. Hello, I'm here today with Doug Fitzgerald, author of One Shot, One Life, the ultimate success formula to help you win at anything in life. Welcome, Doug.
Faye, this is so fun and such an honor. So I'm excited to be with you and to be asked to be part of this interview process. So thank you. This is going to be great.
Awesome. So first, we're going to talk about some things, some questions about you as an author. Tell me something. Does writing exhaust you or exhilarate you?
That's kind of like, that's an interesting question when I read it that you wanted to talk about, because I never have seen myself as a writer or an author. I know on my big hairy goal list, I always had writing a book as a goal one day, but I never really intentionally thought about it or pursued it. And, as writing this book, One Shot, One Life, I realized that, for me, it's hard to get started. Once I get started, I'm immersed and I'm rolling, but it's breaking that hump each day of getting into the actual writing process. So there's part of it that I don't want to say hate. There's part of it that's frustrating to me, and then there's other part of it that I love. So I think it's both energizing and exhausting all at the same time. And I always tell people, when you're writing a book, it's like, understand this, Faye, to an extent. It's literally like birthing a teenager, right? I mean, it's a whole new experience. It's painful at times, but man, it comes out and it's talking back at you. And it's just one of those experiences that but it's so rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
The process, like anything in life, right? The process is usually difficult. It takes persistence over a long period of time. But once you reach the finish line, there's such a reward that comes with that you would never give up that process much. So I think it's both for me. I think it's energizing and exhausting all at the same time.
Right. I understand that. Okay, so can you tell me about an experience in the past when you first learned that language has power?
Well, that one caused me to think back into my past. And I think, as far as language was concerned, back in junior high, I had an English teacher. Her name was Mrs. Ellen Coates. And I haven't thought about her, for probably 30 years. You asked me this question. And the reason why she has such a dear place in my heart, and I never really thought about it a lot, but now that I realize where I've been in the process of writing and communication's been something it's been part of my whole life. I was in radio for 7 years. I was a pastor for 13, and now I've been in business for 13 years. But the lessons I learned from Mrs. Coates was this: be creative. She would sing songs in class. She'd jump on her desk. She would tell us how powerful communication was,
Right.
and how we could use it to impact other people. And I don't think I thoroughly understood it back then. I think she was just more entertaining to me than anything. But now that I think back, that was a moment in time where I realized that there's real power in the way that we utilize language and communication. And, being an author for me is just another aspect of communicating, and it's powerful. It allows you to, it's not only therapy, I think, for us as writers, but I think it is an awful tool. I know it is, to help impact other people's lives. And there's nothing better than that.
Great. Is there any author that you truly admire?
Well, there's a couple. Let me name a couple. The first one, when I think about authors that impact me, I love personal development, but I love personal development that was 40, 50, 60, 80, 100 years ago, because a lot of those authors really didn't have a lot to gain financially from it. Nowadays, it seems like it's a multi-billion-dollar a year business for motivation and personal development. But back then, they were literally, seeking out ways to truly help people and develop and grow. So Napoleon Hill, I love Napoleon Hill. Think and Grow Rich is probably one of my favorite books. But I found this from him. It's How to Raise Your Own Salary. And to me, I think what I've learned from that is, somebody pointed it out to me, that actually was that he had with Dale Carnegie, who asked him to write the book eventually that would be Think and Grow Rich. This is the actual interview where Carnegie shares the points that he teaches. So I like that. And a contemporary author would be Mark Batterson. He's a pastor. I've loved his books and the things that he's done. I'm going through right now, Draw the Circle of his book. It's a 40-day prayer challenge. So, but his books are great. They've caused me to really just think outside the box and really challenge me to go after the dream of my heart. And I think he does that really well. And he communicates in a way that I really relate to. So those are two people that I think of right off the top of my head.
Awesome. Awesome. I have a hard time saying an author I truly admire or a favorite author, because I'm like, in this genre, I like this
Right.
one, and in this one, and
There are a lot.
yes. Well, and especially if you read across, different categories of writing. So,
Yeah.
okay. What kind of research did you do for your book, and how long did it take?
Well, a lot of the research I pulled from, just from my own personal experience.
Hmm.
I was fortunate enough at a very young age to have a lot of great mentors in my life. And that was a huge blessing to me. And they taught me these principles of success and the different phases and growth phases in my life. I always had key people that were there teaching me. And so what I did was the books about, I've got 5 principles to help people stop worrying and start winning in life. Those principles, are God's principles that he shares with us in scripture, but they are also principles that people pointed out to me. So my research was really, was just this personal journey of looking back on my life and extracting those key moments in my life that really were powerful, that spoke to me, that I felt could relate to the reader as well, and allow them to understand better what I'm trying to share in the book. So a lot of it was that. Another thing, when I think about that question, one of the things that I struggled with I understand this too, I don't know, but there's a lot of times where you get what people call the writer's block. You just like, you're stuck.
Yeah.
And, I pray through that, because there's times when I feel like I'm procrastinating. But the reality is, my prayer to God throughout writing the book was, help me to know the difference between procrastinating and being patient. Because what I learned was, I believe God put some roadblocks in my mind for a reason, to wait, because there are things in my book that wouldn't have been there if I would have come faster than I did, if that makes sense. And so
Mhm.
I was thankful for God answering the prayer, of knowing, am I procrastinating or am I being patient in the process? And I think that, as you were researching and as you're developing and compiling all this information and trying to make it concise, was really spoke to me. So I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's
It
where I
does to
was.
me, and I think it will to others too. There are times when, when we might even be doing some craft project, and it's like, well, I don't feel like messing with it today, or I just don't see where that needs to go, and then is wait 2-3 days, whatever, and then it's like, oh, that's how that's supposed to go. Now I
Yes.
can get on it.
Yes.
It can be just even the time to rebuild the passion.
Yep. And I think too, I think it's funny, because I have a guy that I meet with every week as we look at developing One Shot, and there were some things that came up where it's like God works behind the scenes, leaves these little crumbs, and then they're all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's why God did that. God had us wait for that. Oh, that's what, and all these aha moments that wouldn't have happened if you just kind of go out there on your own and try to make things, try to make things happen.
Right.
I love how you said that. Yeah, I agree.
So tell me something. What did you edit out of One Shot, One Life?
You know, I don't think I edited anything.
Wow.
I don't think, I mean, I've got a box of information and stuff. From what I actually wrote, I had an editor that I was working with, and she really helped me craft the message in a way that to hopefully keep the reader's interest. And there weren't a lot of things, I don't think, that other than research stuff that I might have left out, that's things that I actually wrote that we actually cut. We reformulated them and reworded them and put them in different ways to communicate them. But I don't think we really cut much out at all. I think the biggest thing for me is I open up the book with really the lowest point in my wife and I's marriage and our biggest fight. That's how I open up the book. And I think the biggest thing for me was really um, learning how to clearly communicate those illustrations, especially since they're so personal. Number one, that they'll make an impact in people's lives, but also so that it respects the other people in the story, if that makes sense. And
Right.
so I think, we really massaged that quite a bit to make sure that it was the way we wanted it, that was truthful, but respectful at the same time. So
Right.
anyway, I don't,
Like being a pastor and including your kids in a sermon without asking them?
right. Yeah, you don't want to do that.
No.
Especially the older they get.
Right, right. Okay, so let me, uh, can't talk. Tell me what literary success means for you.
I think in this journey, I think at number one, for the book, it's just being faithful to God and his calling. Um, I know a lot of, I get aches at times just hearing people, because I've counseled a lot of people over the years, work with a lot of people over the years, and they have this cry of the heart that they feel like there's something out there for them to do, or they maybe know what they're supposed to do, and they just don't have the courage or take the first step because it's hard. I mean, it's hard. Writing this book was hard. Writing your books are hard, and doing these. You were telling me at the pre-interview here that even doing these videos was kind of it was a step of faith, right? It's
Right.
not easy when you're doing something that you're not haven't done before. So, following God's calling, getting through the process, that alone was just a personal success. I think ultimately, I think all of us as writers, we just we really want to serve people. We want to impact people's lives and make a difference. And so hearing stories come back of how the book has impacted somebody's life or a family member's life, or, hearing stories about how people buy the book to give to somebody else, as a gift, which is, that's the ultimate honor, that somebody would entrust you with that and share your message. But I think also for me, literary success is what we're trying to do with One Shot. Is I just don't want this book to sit there. I want people to use it and interact. And one of the things that we teach in the book, it's the final principle, is the power of a success partner and tapping into having other people around you, cheering you on, picking you up, encouraging you along the way to achieve what you're wanting to achieve. And what's happened over the last year, little over a year since the book was released, is just really people coming on board and wanting to share the message of One Shot. That's just a humbling experience.
Yeah.
One that I've always been part of, I've been a pastor and been in radio and been in business. And a lot of those were part of somebody else's vision. And I've been successful at that. But then you sit back and do your own thing, and you sit back and you go, well, why would somebody want to be part of my vision? And then I had a big wake up call for the last year. Like, this isn't your vision. This is God's vision, number one. And number two, it's selfish to think that way, because you're limiting other people that may want to come on board and help get that message put in your heart. So I think literary success is in different forms for me, but I think ultimately, hopefully, it's impacting people's lives.
Okay. So now let's twist and turn just a little bit here, and we're going to talk more about your book itself. Share with me briefly the backstory behind your book.
Well, the backstory is this. I was, I was successful in business, and over the last 13 years, and I had a moment, like I talked about before, that really struck me between the eyes. That moment, that low point in our marriage, and I opened up the book with that story, and I'll share a little bit of that story because I think it's important to understand the impetus of how this all happened. But we were having great success with our business. I've been, like I said before, fortunate to have mentors along the way to teach me about how to have success, but then how to honor God in the process of having that success. Well, as this business was growing over the first we were just running. I mean, it was 24/7. We were working our tails off. And in the process, I had lost sight of one of the most important things, which was really, building up, growing, and developing my relationship with my wife, Tammy. We've been married for 28 years. She's the love of my life. And I can't do what I do without her. But like anything in life, that you have your ups and downs. And I always tell people, if you can make it through the downs, the valleys, the highs are so much higher if you can just get through those. We were in the deepest valley we had ever been in our relationship. So we were in the worst fight of our marriage, and it was a beautiful night. I remember it was like 2 a.m. But if you'd looked in our home, it was anything but beautiful. We were just having a knockdown drag out at 2 a.m. And so I was so frustrated. Verbal knockdown drag out, by the way. So I was so frustrated, I had to leave. I had to blow off some steam. Our home sits right in a 40-acre park that also has one of our local high schools. We live in Lincoln, Nebraska, and a city football stadium. And if you get on the sidewalk, it goes in a circle for 2 miles. So I'm yelling under my breath at 2 a.m. And I'm frustrated, and I'm asking God over and over, why did you do this to me? Why are you doing this to me? And I couldn't figure it out. And I'm just going along. And I'm sure if you'd have seen me, my neighbors probably thought, there goes Doug. He's lost it. He's lost his marbles. But I got to a place on the sidewalk where this football stadium was on the right. There was a parking lot on the left. I didn't think anybody could hear me. So I just thought if I scream, it would make me feel better. So I just screamed as loud as I could, God, why are you doing this to me? And it was literally like he picked me up, put me on the 50-yard line, and there was a thump, thump, thump of the stadium lights coming on. And through the loudspeaker, he said, Doug, I'm not doing this to you. You're doing this to you. And it was at that moment that I realized I got my priorities way out of whack.
Mm.
And I was the one that was at fault. So I ran home and talked to Tammy, and we began that process of getting counseling, restoring our marriage. But that was really the moment that God used in my life to say, all right, message here that I want you to get out to other people. And you don't know necessarily what it looks like at this point, but trust me in this process and we'll go. So we got some great counseling. When we got through the counseling process, the counselor said, Doug, I want you to do one thing now that you're on the healthy side of this. He said, every time you meet with a guy for lunch or for coffee or anything, and they say, hey, how you doing? I want you to tell them this. We're doing great now, but Tammy and I really struggled with our marriage. We got some great counseling. We're doing better than we ever have. Hey, the 10 guys, the first 10 guys I shared that with said this: you went through that. I'm going through that right now. I thought I was all alone and I don't know what to do. And those conversations are the ones that said, you know what? God's speaking to me saying, listen, you've got a message that can help people. And now's the time to do it. So I hired a business coach, and we began this process of developing what is now called One Shot, One Life. The book's supposed to be a 2-page PDF opt-in form on our website. She goes, you've been teaching the success formula principles for decades now to thousands of people. Why don't you go ahead and just do a quick little opt-in, and we'll start getting some emails for you to communicate with. And I said, Joy, this is not a 2-page opt-in. It's a book. And that's when we began the process where she said, start writing, just start writing. And so I did. And I think it took me a little over a year to write the book and to really develop it to where we're. That was kind of the story behind the story and the reason why we wrote the book. And we teach the 5 principles that I've taught for years that help people really have success in all areas of their life: money, people, faith, work, health, and their hopes and dreams. And we really focus on that. And I tell the story in the book too, how we got to that point of identifying those areas. So a little bit of story behind the story. Actually, there's multiple layers to that whole thing. So
Yeah, you're a communicator. You could sit here all evening and talk about that, right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Briefly, tell me about those principles that you've applied. Like you talk about these 5 principles, and you actually show that they're old principles, that they've come from age-old learning. So tell me about those briefly.
Absolutely. One of the things that Joy, my business coach, had me do to start identifying how are we going to communicate this message effectively, we came up with a question. I asked 92 of my good friends and colleagues, what do you worry about that keeps you up at night? Because my marriage, when we were going through that, I mean, it was 24/7. I couldn't get it out of my mind. Neither could Tammy. I mean, it was like, it was one of those things that I needed to take care of. And nearly everybody got back to me with real heartfelt, answers to that. So we took that information, compiled it, and identified the top key areas that we wanted to focus on. The areas of money, which was number 1, far hands down, people struggling with money and worrying about it. Relationships, faith, working, their health. And the 6th one was actually sex, which I believe we need to talk about more in our society. I think it's getting totally distorted, but we actually add that into our relationships category. And then hopes and dreams, people fulfilling this cry in their heart. And so the 5 principles that we put together to help people walk through those areas are these. Number 1, the first principle is helping people identify clear priorities, vital priorities in life that they need to achieve. Number 2, finding a proven plan to achieve those priorities, not just a plan. We tell people it has to be a proven that's worked in somebody else's life or your life in the past. The 3rd thing is we teach people the principle of mastering persistence, because we know anybody can have a plan, but unless you carry it out, it ain't going to work. And then we have the last 2 principles, what we call the multipliers. And the reason why I call them the multipliers is I know that when you implement these two, you're going to have far greater success far faster. So the first one is understanding the power of regular evaluation. In other words, evaluating your progress or lack of progress. And you got to do it on a regular basis. While I was building my business with my relationship with Tammy, it wouldn't have gotten to the point that it did. So that's the fourth principle. The fifth principle is, I think, one of the most powerful principles in the book, tapping into the power of having a success partner. Someone who knows you so deeply and intimately, they know what you're trying to achieve in your life, that they're there to rally you on, to cheer you on, to pick you up when you fail. And they're just there for you. I've got a great story about Moses, Aaron, and Hur in my book. Read it. You'll understand success partner, why it's so important. So those are the 5 principles. And it's been, and like you said, I think that the most important thing is before each of the principles that I teach, these are principles that come straight out of Scripture. They're God-led principles, and if we apply them, we're just going to have success, and that's what He promises.
So, like, going back to the book helps.
That's right. That's right.
Who knew?
Who knew that, right? I know.
Okay. You seem to have written this book in a way that it just seems like you're holding the reader's hand as they go through it. Was that part of your plan?
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons. Here's the book, and if you notice, it's a really thin book. And on the back, I've never seen this before, but it says a read time of 89 minutes. The reason why we developed the book the way we did is because we wanted it to be something that we wanted to be potent. We wanted to get to the point. We wanted people to actually implement it. And so we walk people through. One of the things I think that we assume in our culture today is that people just know, right? They know how to have success, or they know how to implement things. A lot of times we don't take the time to teach people and walk alongside with them. So we wrote it in a way where we teach the principle. And then after we teach the principle, we have action steps for you to follow. And then we have worksheets that are both in the back of the book and also that you can download for free from our website. And it's just a practical tool and resource for people. You cannot not read the book and know exactly what to do. And that's exactly what we wanted to do with this book. So hopefully we've achieved that and accomplished that.
Okay. This is in your first, I don't even know if you would call it a chapter, but in the very first part where you're talking about foundational things. And you ask a question. And so tell me about that question. What is it? And you tell your readers to ask it often as they go through this process.
Well, the foundation of anything in life is relationship, right? And I believe that God calls us to love Him and love others. And it says the greatest thing we can do is love other people. And it says the second command is just as important as the first. In other words, loving important as loving God. He doesn't separate those two. Right. So we set that up as the foundation of the book, that anything that you do in life, we can set all kinds of goals and priorities in life, but if it doesn't revolve around loving and serving God and people, you're going to get to probably the end of your life and regret some of the steps you've made or some of the things you've tried to pursue. And so the question that we ask people is what you're doing or planning on doing allowing me to love God and love other people more? It's just that simple. And if we can ask that question as we go through life, we do throughout the book, then you're going to make decisions and pursue things that really are going to matter. And what the world says matters a lot of times isn't what truly matters in the end. Right. And so we just want to, the reason why we ask that question is we really want to make sure that the reader is focused on that as they move through the steps. Because there are a lot of books out there about how to set goals, and how to achieve goals. There's a lot of them. But if we don't have that one foundational thing, am I impacting God and impacting other people and loving Him and loving them more? If we leave that out of the equation, I think we leave the most important thing out of the equation. So that's why we ask the question.
I agree. That one really impacted me when I read it. So I had to make sure that we shared that today. So tell me, what do you hope that your book achieves in the lives of your readers?
One of the things that I've been working on, I'm a business consultant. We meet every single week, and we're developing mastermind groups and other tools and resources with One Shot. And one of the things that he's really had me focus on is truly understanding the purpose of what we're trying to do at One Shot. What are our values, and what is the purpose? And I always tell him, because we're still working on it, it's so hard sometimes to really nail down emotionally what that purpose is. I always call it that feeling deep down inside that you need to get out or want to get out, but you can't express it completely yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of really close to be able to in words express that. But it's my desire that this book will take the emotion that's inside of you, that cry of your heart. Maybe it's a cry of your heart of a relationship that's falling apart. Maybe it's that cry of your heart that you're not handling your finances well, and you're swimming in debt, and there's a battle going on, and you're losing. Maybe your health and fitness is struggling, and you want to get better at that. Maybe if it's just dull or dead, or you don't have one, or you wonder, how well am I doing? Or maybe you have these hopes and dreams. Maybe since you've been a kid, you've had this hope and dream in your heart that is placed there. It keeps repeating itself over and over, and you haven't done anything on it. Whatever it is inside of you, whatever the cry is, or the battle, or the desire, that's just that inside. I want to help people get that out. And that's what I want from the book. And as my good friend Tracy always tells me, she's a success partner, says, I like to push people off the cliff. And what she means by that is this: when they express to me, if somebody expresses to me a desire or a dream that they have, or a struggle that they're going through, I'm not going to let it sit. I'm going to push and challenge them to actually take that first step of faith and do something about it. And that's what I hope the book does, is just helps give people the courage to take that first step.
Wow. I love your passion. We met 2 years ago, and I loved it then, and I love it still. You energize people just by your presence, and I think that your book will do the same.
Well, thank you. And what I love about you, Faye, is, get this. So I don't know if anybody watching or listening knows, but we were at a conference 2 years ago. First time I'd ever been to it. Faye, you were the first person I met at that conference. We were at the VIP dinner. I'm going in there not knowing anybody. You're the first person I met, and you made me feel so welcome. You put me at ease. A little anxiety when you go into a room you don't know anybody, but it was so comfortable. And so that's how our relationship started. And then this year I go back to the same conference, and who's the very first person I see when I walk in the hotel? It's Faye, sitting on the couch chatting with another person there. When we saw each other, hugged each other, and again, just that welcoming comfort. So thank you. I appreciate you so much. I know so many people that we both know just dearly love you and appreciate you. So you for being you.
Cool. Fill my tank up there, Doug. All
Next
right.
year at the conference, you better be the first person. I'm wondering, how is God going to work this? Are we going to see each other at the airport? Are we going to run into each other at Target? What is it going to be? So.
It can happen. It can happen. I'm willing for whichever. Thank you, Doug, so much for sharing and for letting your passion and your out.
You're welcome.
All right. Till next time.